Hello. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the RPD podcast. My name is Gjertson, and today we will be discussing the Getting Things Done method by David Allen, also known as the GTD method, with our special guest, Garner. I actually first met Aaron through the fitness app, Strava, because a mutual friend noticed that we were running the exact same route in our neighborhood. So Aaron and I decided to meet up and run together at a local track. We ended up running, but then we ended up discussing a lot of different conversations and just having a really good time together afterward for many, many hours. So it was evident to me that Aaron is just a thoughtful, creative, and friendly individual, one of which I am honored to have on the show today. Aaron is the co-founder of Tetra Prime Consulting and has dedicated over 6 years to building and shaping that company. Aaron has also spent the last decade serving those with mental health challenges, including direct patient care, being a mental health first aid instructor, and serving for 7 years on the board of directors for the Mental Health America of Hendricks County. Aaron is also a graduate from Purdue University with dual bachelor's degrees in economics and psychology. We are thrilled to welcome Aaron to the show. Thank you for joining us today, Aaron.
Thank you, Ian. I appreciate being here. And the topic that we're going to talk about today it really is a passion of mine. It's something that I don't get to talk about all that often, but it's the intersection of two worlds that I've been in for, I would say, the majority of my life now. I've been trying to figure out how to be productive, and I've had an interest in mental health from childhood. So where productivity and mental health converge, I think that this topic is highly relevant to anyone that cares about that.
First, I kind of want to dive into why people should utilize the GTD method. How can consistently using the GTD method impact personal and professional growth?
Ian, I think that it all goes back to maintaining a sufficient amount of order in a world that's becoming increasingly chaotic. I'm just thinking about the roles that you and I fill in our day-to-day lives. I mean, how many different hats do you wear, Ian, personally, and within your own organization?
Personally, quite a few. I'm a full-time working adult, and I have a wife and 2 kids and 2 dogs, and I have to take care of myself. So there's lots of different hats that I have to wear, lots of different responsibilities, and they're all connected to me, but they're not necessarily all connected to each other. And then from a professional standpoint, here at RPD, I do wear several hats. I'm wearing lots of hats all the time.
Lots of different hats all the time, and then if you couple that reality with how many different paths that somebody can contact you through. So, I mean, just sitting here right now, I mean, how many different ways could I potentially reach out to you? I could probably reach out to you via like a text message, an email, and as you mentioned earlier, we met via a Strava app. I could send you a message on Strava, and we've later become connected professionally on LinkedIn and Facebook. So there's just so many different avenues that somebody could potentially connect to you. And that's just me. I mean, you're in your workplace right now. So people could come in at any moment that have something to hand to you. So the amount of ways that people could interrupt us, and those interruptions are relevant to different hats that we're wearing. So in the past, we had less hats to wear, and we weren't trying to wear them all at the same time. They were sort of divided by the location that we're in. So like I wouldn't have interruptions from my wife and children when I was at work, not as much. It would be more difficult for them to get through to me. But because we live in the world that we do today, it's much easier for people to get through those barriers. So I think that that is what creates a lot of the challenges and a lot of the chaos. So the coupling that reality with the fact that we know that 1 in 5 Americans, will have a diagnosable mental illness, and that about half of people, I think it's 46% of people will have a diagnosable mental illness sometime within their lifetime. Those numbers are just staggering. Literally, a small meeting that we might have, a great meeting size is 5. Well, 1 in 5. If there's a high probability that one of those people is going to be struggling with a mental health challenge at some point within that year. So if you just think about that fact alone, not to mention being bombarded with all the different avenues that people can communicate with us and all the different hats that we're trying to wear simultaneously, causes a lot of challenges within the workplace and also a lot of challenges outside the workplace.
So my next question would be the how. How can someone utilize the GTD method? For someone completely new to the concept, what would be your top tips for getting started and staying consistent with it?
Okay, so there's going to be some good news and some bad news associated with this. Do you want the good news or the bad news first?
Hmm. Well, I do consider myself an optimist, so let's go ahead and go with the good news first.
The good news is that it's very intuitive, that there's nothing that we're going to talk about that is complicated or conceptually hard to understand. Are you ready for the bad news?
Okay, I'm ready for the bad news.
The bad news is just that it requires discipline. You just have to have a disciplined practice of doing the things up front. Um, we're not going to have any less work to do. We're talking about productivity, so you might actually be doing more work, but you're going to be doing it in a way that's on your terms, and it's going to be at a relaxed pace versus doing it very quickly. And I think a good analogy would be at the beginning of the podcast, you mentioned that we both are runners, and that's how we met. And there is a subset of runners that do a lot of zone two running. And for those of you that are not runners, zone two it's just it's a relaxed pace. Your heart rate's not very high. We're talking about a level of difficulty between 1 and 5. 5 is like really hard sprints, getting your heart rate way up. So zone two is relatively easy. There are people that try to run faster staying at zone two. So, and the strategy for running faster, staying at zone two, is that you need to improve your efficiency. You need to make sure that you maintain that you're relaxed while you're in that zone, so your heart rate doesn't start to climb. And believe it or not, there are professional triathletes that spend hours and hours and hours doing zone two training, and they're incredibly fast at zone two. And zone two is minimal effort. They can almost do what other people do in zone 4 or 5 while being in a relaxed state at zone two. And that's where we want to be. Like that's sort of the gold standard, is to be so good at this stuff that we're able to do it in a more relaxed state. So, do you want to get into some details of what that might look like?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the first thing that we have to do is make cuts on the things that are coming into our life. So you have to have some level of discipline in regards to how many people are able to contact you, and like just having our devices. How many notifications do you allow to come through on this device, and when do you allow those notifications to come through? So you have to control the flood of information coming at you. And sometimes that's kind of difficult because there are a lot of things that are valuable that you may need to cut, because there are things that are more valuable that you'd rather have in your life. So, I mean, for example, there are hobbies that I have. I love the idea of getting into woodworking and learning how to weld, but I also love the idea of spending time with my wife and my daughter a little bit more. So cutting out those things that they're good, but they're not great. And that requires a little bit of discipline to say no to some things that you kind of want to do, but it's in service of the things that you really want to have in your life. Then after you've made the cuts on what you're going to allow in, you have to collect those ideas. So my question for you is, do you ever have ideas about things that you need to do when you're not in a context with which you could handle that situation?
Yes, absolutely. All the time.
We literally have hundreds of these different things that are going on, different commitments that we've made to our family life and the different hats that we wear at work. And if those things are popping into your head and you don't have a good way of getting them out of your head and plugged into a system that you trust, it it causes you to waste a lot of brain power in the meantime, and have a lot of worry around whether or not you're going to drop the ball on any of these things that you're trying to keep in the air. So the next thing beyond just collecting them is having the discipline to clarify what these things actually are. So a lot of times I write all these things down. I walk around literally with a notepad like this that I use. I'm a very digital person, but for this particular application, I like to be analog. And then I go back and I review these at the end of the day and see which ones are good ideas. Some of them are just not a good idea. Like I was out jogging and I thought this was a good idea. And now that I sit down and look at this from a more objective point of view, I'm like, yeah, that's not really something that we're going to do. And I just mark it off and throw it away. But not even every once in a while, very frequently, some of those things are, that's really important. I got to make sure that I do that, and I'll go ahead and plug it into my system, defining what the outcome is and determining what the next action is. That's the part that requires discipline, that we feel like writing something down as a trigger is good enough, but it's not. You need to figure out what the outcome is going to look like and what the very next action is to get yourself to that, to that outcome is. And if you do that, it relieves a lot of stress because you've externalized all those thoughts. You're not quite there yet, though. You have to plug that into a system where you trust that you're going to be reminded when you need that. And David Allen always uses the example of, if you got to bring something with you to work in the morning, you can sit it in front of the front door because you can't open the front door without seeing that thing, and you won't forget to do it. I mean, I do this with my daughter's schoolwork, that she has something that she's supposed to bring back, a permission slip or something like that. I'll make sure I put that permission slip in her lunchbox, or I put it, I hang it on the front door so there's no way that it can be forgotten. But as long as it's clarified and it's plugged into a place that you won't forget it, then you can get it off of your mind. You can rest easy. You can stop worrying about that thing because you're confident that that's going to happen. And that's the organization piece of it. And then the last two pieces are reviewing and doing. When I'm looking at everything in aggregate, it lets me know how much bandwidth I have and how much cutting I need to do. So I realize that this is not possible to do all these tasks. So then I start to prioritize things and I start to make cuts. And then you make those cuts based on your values, how important that is to you. So just making sure that you're reviewing that. The nice thing about it is that once you get down to the runway where you're doing the stuff, you feel comfortable about what you're doing. You know that you're doing the right things. And when you're not doing a thing, you know that it was by design that you're not doing that thing. You're not doing that because this other thing that you're doing is actually more important. It's essentially externalizing all of your thoughts, getting them all out of your head, doing the upfront decision making, deciding what the outcome for that thought is, and deciding what the next action for it is, and then getting that plugged into a system where you can trust that you're going to be reminded to do that at the time that you need to do that. And if you're able to do that process, it relieves all of the rumination and it frees up cognitive space because you're not spending time thinking about the same thing over and over again. It allows for new ideas to come in, and it allows for just less general worry in your life. So you guys have an ERP system. So the way that you're going to be able to do it is going to be on another level just because all of that is able to be integrated. But there are people that do this with paper and pencil, that they write down all the different things, that obligations that they have, and they categorize those things. And that's how I first started doing this, probably, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago now.
I've kind of found for myself that when I have more inboxes, the process becomes a little bit more confusing. So what I mean by inboxes is, like Aaron pointed out, his notebook, right? That's like an inbox in which he's capturing those ideas, right? So if I've got a mechanism for capturing ideas here and here and here, and I'm having to go back and check all three of them, that's going to make me less efficient and effective in how I'm utilizing it. So I find that when you're capturing something, it's often best to just grab it in one place, right? The goal really when you're capturing is to get everything in your brain that needs to be done, and just put it somewhere where you can go back and review it, like you've mentioned. For myself, what I've often done is if I'm in the middle of a conversation like this, or if I'm in the middle of a task and an idea comes to me, I literally just whip out my phone and then I just like capture it right then and there.
We all know that it feels relieving to have a grocery list. It's so much easier if you have and then if you organize your grocery list based on like how you go around the grocery store, it makes it easier. You're not bouncing all over the place. So, and then like if you have your grocery list and separate out like the hardware store versus the grocery store, that makes things better because you can't get the stuff at the hardware store at the grocery store. To circle back to what you had mentioned, when we're first getting started, making it very simple is key. Try to minimize the amount of inboxes that you have. Let people know that these are the inboxes that I check. The key is being happy with the things that do get done, and also being happy with the things that you've chosen not to do. There's just not enough time to do everything that we would want to do. So the only thing that you can do is to make sure that the right stuff is getting done and feel comfortable that the right stuff is getting done.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Aaron. We all really appreciate your thoughts and insight as we've learned about the GTD method. If you feel like this episode has resonated with you today, I'm going to go ahead and link David Allen's content in the description of the video. That includes his website, a link to the book, and his YouTube channel. So if you want to check that out and learn more about the GTD method, I would highly recommend it. And once again, thank you to Rubber Products Distributors for sponsoring the podcast today. You can visit their website at www.rpdcorp.com to learn more about the products and services that they provide. Thank you, Aaron, once again, and thank you, everyone, for watching. Goodbye.
Thank you.